Coastal Salish and Duwamish territory. All right. Otherwise known nowadays as Seattle. Yes. Southern California. Got Portland area. I recognize that from the tribes. Multnomah, Chinook, Wasco. Yeah, I'm glad to see multiple tribes mentioned because where I live is also, it's kind of a boundary land between two tribes. And I was puzzling over that for a bit, but I will mention them both in a few minutes when we get underway. Lenape. That is New York, yes? And I don't recognize that one. Tell us more, Luke. Western Abenaki. That also didn't help me, Luke, but that's fine. I have a map in my kitchen of all the languages spoken by indigenous people of what's now the United States. And it doesn't help necessarily with the tribal names because it's done by languages. So I know more about that than I do the names of the languages quite often. Ah, the Los Angeles Basin, right. I haven't learned that much of that. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you so much. All of you for letting
now
me
recording.
know. Grand. Well, let's get underway, shall we? You going to do a quick intro, Marla, or shall
I will. This is the Reverend Molly Kate, a spiritual and sacred leader person who reveres the nature and beauty in all things living. So I'd like to introduce you to the Reverend Molly Kate. Thank you for being here with us, and have a great session. If you have any questions or comments, please put it in the chat, and we will try to address it in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank Marla for being the co-host here to keep an eye on the chat, and also for Ruthie Engelke, you see her over there working away on keeping us going. She's also, as I am, a member of Cooperation Humboldt, and delighted to be hosting this session today to talk about reimagining sacred arts. Now, what could that possibly mean? Well, I'm going to get into that in a moment. First, I want to acknowledge that here in where I'm located, which is a couple of towns south of the folks, most of the folks in the session last evening, here in Northern California, still in Humboldt County, I am on the stolen lands that the boundary, the two tribes next door to each other, the Wiyot and the Nongati, and this was an area where they both overlapped in where they lived. So an example of the interconnectedness of people and their ability to get along with each other. So I want to acknowledge that to start with, and thank you all so much for putting so many of your locations into the chat. I love the feeling of speaking with people from so many different places. This is just grand. So I owe a lot of gratitude to artists in my life. I come from a very privileged background, which means I knew almost nothing about anything growing up. And in my 7 decades plus of life, most of the learning I've gotten hasn't come from school at all. It's come from writers and dancers and playwrights and those who produce plays and poets. It's come from visual artists of all kinds. It's come from so many sources that now I revere what I call the human garden of cultures. It's one of the most beautiful expressions of sacredness I know. But that's not the limit of it. I want to talk a little bit today about this challenging word sacred, and then ask you to participate with me in a couple of ways as we can sort of unpack this notion. And hopefully I'll be able to celebrate with you who we truly all are as expressions of the creativity that I believe simply is a quality of the universe itself. So my own tradition is called the New Thought Movement. It has several branches. I come from the one called religious science most often, though right now I'm serving a small unity church in Eureka, California, and they both believe the same things, that there is no personified deity, no guy in the sky. There is nothing of that kind. There is simply a set of qualities or principles which are what forms the universe and evolves it continuously. It's sort of built-in systems and principles in the way gravity is a principle, or electricity. These are things we don't understand at all, but we use them quite effectively. And so in the same way, this idea of the sacred to me is a quality of being, and certainly a quality in each person. And that's the direction from which I'm setting out today to talk to you about this. The other quality that we share in all new branches of New Thought is something that comes, the oldest I know expression of it is from various Hindu traditions, thousands of years old, the idea of the divine within, the Atman, the sacred space within each person that has a voice. If we learn to listen to it and be directed by it. Sometimes I joke that this inner intelligence is the best social secretary imaginable. It never makes mistakes. I do. But if I'm listening to that voice within me, everything flows quite beautifully. So I wanted to just acknowledge all the artists of various kinds that have led me to this moment in time where I'm thrilled to celebrate with you this idea of the sacred and how it really, I believe, needs to be put back in its central place within the idea of art itself. In the West, of course, a lot of art has been commodified, like everything else that we are talking about this weekend. The basic ideas of extractive economy say that everything is a resource, from human bodies to human creativity to all the rest of nature out there that's beyond our own persons and minds, that it's all there to be extracted for the benefit of a very few people to hoard as much of it as they can at the expense of the rest of us. And that to me is quite the opposite of what not only art is about, but what human life is about, or what life in general is about. And so here today, I want to celebrate with you a reopening of this idea and make the case with you that art is a sacred project in all of its forms. Now, through much of history around the globe, the arts have been, by kind of definition, subject to the dominator forces within which they existed, partly for the sustenance of those creating the art. There's been this requirement that artists have the backing of the purse strings of privilege, that they are trapped quite often, or have been, within the whims of princes and emperors and popes, and therefore toe the party line, whether that be a political or a religious party line. And in talking about the sacred today, I'm not talking about religion. I'm definitely not talking about God, that most problematic little word, which is used to mean so many different things by so many different people. I rarely use it myself, and I am indeed a minister that speaks every single Sunday. I use the term infinite, creative, intelligent presence most often if I'm going to talk about it, or usually shorten that to infinite creativity. And that's what I want to say to you is sacredness that imbues all of life, that all of the universe is imbued with this idea of creativity, and that creativity itself is sacred. So those who've been captive to the whims of the dominators have created absolutely magnificent beauty. I mean, just Michelangelo alone would be an example of an extraordinary person with great artistic vision and skill. All of his work, though, in service to one particular path, a religion that in fact was responsible for the suffering and slaughter of millions of people. So I think it's time we reopen the idea of what sacred means again. This is an ancient new idea to bring back and reclaim for ourselves this notion of how sacredness can operate in our own lives and how we can celebrate who we truly are and honor who we truly are with a greater sense of freedom from honoring our own sacredness within. All of the world's peoples can, in fact, be more expressive than they have been allowed to be by the dominator models. Now, down through that history of the dominators being in charge of the ideas of what constituted sacred and what could be spoken aloud or created, there were a few who broke the mold, and two of them are my absolute favorites. One was the unknown writer, though often credited to a personage called Lao Tse of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching was an extraordinary expression in China of a very different mindset from the extractive, exploitative dominator mindset. As those of you who've read the Tao Te Ching know, it stands for the idea of living within a flow that's expressed by nature itself, and that non-doing is the way to do. And that paradox is one of the things I loved about the Tao Te Ching when I first found it back in 1969. As far as leadership, many of the verses of the Tao speak of leadership and how it needs to be gentle, and the word egalitarian isn't used in the book anywhere, the translations I've seen, but that's implied in many of the verses, where a leader's role is in fact to honor those that are being led. One of the verses, one of the early ones, is often number 3, though they're numbered differently in different versions of the Tao. Some of the language of this one says, "The wise rule by lessening yearning and filling bellies, by weakening ambitions and strengthening bones." Quite the opposite of what you see in a dominator mindset. And so this idea, the Tao was written perhaps 500-600 BC, 800 BC, perhaps. We don't even know how far back it goes before it was oral tradition, before it was written down. This is not a new idea by any means. And in the West, my favorite example of breaking the rules is the great playwright Euripides, because the ancient Athenians are credited with starting the idea of drama in the West. And in the Athenian culture, drama was part of several festivals a year of sacred to them ritual that was in fact following a specific set of beliefs, the state dictated belief system. And most of the playwrights, while they produced beautiful work, little of which has survived to our time, basically did over and over again the basic ideas. They followed what they were taught as the basic ideas of this sacred presentation. Drama in those days was not merely edification and entertainment. It was in fact what we would call a religious experience. Euripides decided at one point to absolutely break free of that. And it was because in the year 416 BCE, the Athenians were full of themselves. They had come out on top in some wars. They were riding high in terms of ownership of land, and they decided that they would force every island around them to follow what we would call now the extractive model, the dominator model. And they said every island around us will give us their wealth and do what we say, or we will kill you. One of the islands, Melos, said no. And so the Athenians invaded. They killed all the men. They enslaved the women and children, and they established their own colony on the island. That did not sit well with Euripides, and a year later he produced what is considered in the West the very first anti-war play ever written, which is called The Trojan Women. It's one of my favorite pieces of writing ever. It's just heartbreaking. And it shows you that even within the enormous constraints of the dominator model, there are those who refuse to toe the line. And so I wanted to give a nod to Euripides today as one of the people who has had the courage to not follow the limitations set for him. So what do I mean by this idea of sacred? To me, it's about honoring all our relations. Humans, of course, all of us, but also the four-legged, the beings with fur, fins, wings, even the rooted in the ground. All life itself is a part of this idea of the sacredness of this process of an unfolding creativity. I see the universe itself as a creative expression, and life its major form through which it does that. And so honoring each of those forms and the relations and connections between them, that to me is as close as I can come to a simple definition of the idea of the sacred. And also within us, it's finding that inner voice I spoke of before, that the Sanskrit word Atman expresses. That in each of you here today and in each person everywhere around the world, there is a voice that is sacred, that is there to be part of your expressiveness, however you show up in the world with that. Whatever your kind of art or expression of creativity, it wells up from this place within you. And one of the things I want to do in a little while, I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so within about 10 minutes, I want to go into and invite you into a short visualization journey where we can listen within to that voice and see what it might have to say, that you can share then into the chat. Just a few more words before that. In our current time, it's mostly capitalist money lords, and in previous times it was feudal money lords who sought to dictate what we honored and cherished, and that has shifted over time. And now here in the United States and in other highly industrialized nations, the idea of the sacred is almost extinct. And I could see during this past year with COVID how much suffering, additional suffering, was caused in people because they did not have a grounding in themselves of what the sacred means quite often. Religions sometimes will tap into that idea of the sacred fairly well, and sometimes they do not. So I do not limit this idea to those who say they are spiritual or religious. To me, if you have a sense of awe in anything, a rainbow, the starlit sky at night, the smile of a baby, dog greeting you at the door, or a cat saying, purring and nuzzling up against you. If you have a sense of awe at any of that, or however you would find awe in, then you're talking to me, I think, about this sacred connection, because that's where, to me, sacredness lies, is in connection. There's no sacred text or holy book or holy vessel like a grail or statue that in and of itself is sacred. It's only sacred because it has some connection to a set of meanings and values that we give this object our honor to. But in fact, the honoring is beyond that, behind that, within ourselves, this sacred connection to the values we hold and to all of life itself. And so I'm grateful to be able to talk with you a little bit about this today. The soulfulness of Mother Earth and all her relations. That, to me, the interwoven, interconnected, expansive expression of life and evolution itself as an intelligent, creative expression of life, It's a sacred dance. And that's what we're all a part of. And that is what we create from. Now, Cooperation Humboldt has this theory of change that we use that I wanted to talk a little bit about before we go into our time together in visualization, and ask you a question to put into the chat as I unpack this. Where these ideas open up for you? The 4 principles of the theory of change for Cooperation Humboldt and other organizations are to resist exploitation in all its forms, to build new systems and structures that sustain and honor life everywhere, to empower those who have been silenced or seldom heard so that more and more voices are a part of this interconnectivity, and to inspire those, particularly young people coming up behind us, but perhaps those who of any age who felt themselves squashed, to inspire all to the highest and best that they can create. So that to me also is a very creative process. And there are so many artists and so many arts that have been a part of it for me. As I mentioned before, I'm in my 70th decade. So every person I'm going to mention is probably pretty old school to most of you, because I'm thinking most of you are quite a bit younger than I am. But I want to honor some of those folks who have come before me and been a part of this opening for me. I mentioned before the dance itself as a form. And for me, that's been Alvin Ailey, American School, and a dance troupe for the Dance Theater Harlem. So many individual dancers who have come along, mostly modern dance for me, which I think is an extraordinary and beautiful expression, but also a great form out of Japan in post-World War II, which I participated in a lot myself. It's called Butoh. If you don't know it, check it out. It's B-U-T-O-H. It's a marvel because it involves going within first and orienting yourself to that inner voice that you have, and then allowing the movement simply to flow out of your listening to your inner processes. It's a meditation in movement, basically. So I love Butoh, and I recommend it to anyone who hasn't tried it. In music, oh my, so many decades worth. But I want to mention some particular favorites here who've really broken the mold. One is an extraordinary piece of work that part of the body of work done by the great jazz vocalist Abbey Lincoln. She's one of my favorites of all time. And for a while, she worked with Max Roach, who's a drummer and a composer, and his colleague and collaborator, Oscar Brown, who was a lyricist. And they did an album back in the 60s called Freedom Now, which is extraordinary. You can listen to it on YouTube. I often listen to Abbey Lincoln when I'm working. And this album has a piece in it called Triptych, which has 3 different parts. It's more in response to the civil rights movement of the 60s. And the central piece is called Protest. And it ends as, I think, only, well, Nina Simone could have done it too, but Abbey Lincoln did this extraordinary job. It ends with a minute and 20 seconds of Abbey doing ascending screams as jazz music. It's an extraordinary piece. So that to me is sacred art right there. Sacred art isn't pretty necessarily. It doesn't have the limitations of some version of what God says to do. It doesn't have limitations of any ownership model at all. It comes out of people, out of their hearts and minds and bodies in a yoga. You know, the word yoga means yoke. It's yoking together your body, mind, and spirit, your body, mind, and heart, soul, however you think of that. You may not have any sense of religion yourself or particular spirituality to do this. As I said before, if you have a sense of awe at something in the universe, you've got all you need to find this place within you. And through Butoh or through listening to artists like Abbey Lincoln, stretch yourself and dare to create what's yours to create. Excuse me. In the field of poetry, my 2 favorites are the Santee Sioux writer John Trudell, who was a member of the American Indian movement for many years, and in fact ran the radio station on Alcatraz Island when AIM took over Alcatraz for a while. Pardon me. But he had suffered a terrible loss in his life of his wife and 4 children and mother-in-law murdered in a fire of very suspicious origin. And that transformed his life. And he suddenly began to write very political poetry. So if you don't know the work of John Trudell, I highly recommend you take a look. I have a small course that I do that celebrates his writing in a couple of weeks. And then 2 weeks on, the great poet Audre Lorde, lesbian feminist poet, died way too young. And she too has an extraordinary voice that combines a rigorous approach to poetry with a great political voice as well. So those two are just the beginnings of so much in the world of poetry that have spoken to me over the years. In the visual arts, I've seen this idea opening up of paying more attention to indigenous artists from many cultures. Pardon me, this is allergy season for me, and I'm going through a bit of a problem here for the moment. I've been delving into visually online the work of indigenous Australian artists, extraordinary work. It's finally being seen more by Westerners, whether they're in Australia or elsewhere. A lot of the work shows like a very fractal, open to wider expression view than visual arts I've seen mostly in the West, though there are, of course, Western artists who've done that as well. We have had a wonderful opening through the years of this idea of what can and should be shown as visual art of all kinds, expressing that. Then there's international animation, I think my favorite form of visual arts, because in international animation, one of the great limiting factors that makes it so come to life is those who attempt to create a visual work that's not limited by language, which means you produce an animated short that has no particular language to it, and therefore has to be able to show what's being expressed in terms of the arc of the story through visual images and color changes alone. So that kind of international animation, I think, is quite extraordinary as well. And then there's the magnificent Frida Kahlo. And for a moment here, I'd like to screen share and show you my favorite piece of work from her, which is this miracle on screen called The Love Embrace of the Universe, the Earth. She has the word Mexico in parentheses. That's actually the goddess Tonantzin in Mexico, and herself and Diego, and then Senor Xlotl, and that's the little mouse figure you see down below. Now, this piece of work to me is a perfect expression of the sacred for so many reasons, because it expresses this very Mexican image of Tonantzin, the goddess of Mexico, who's often shown holding a bowl with the sacred 3 sisters, the great non-exploitative form of agriculture, which includes corn, beans, and squash, which all grow together and sustain each other in a very interdependent way. This image, of course, has the greatness of the goddess image here, backed by the universe image. And then I love how, if you can really see that, but the darkness that's the earth side actually has this kind of pregnant belly form to it that it takes over a little more than half of the canvas rather than the the side that is the universe side. And then in the center, you get this echo of Michelangelo's Pietà, and she's portraying then, in this case, in the original, what's Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Diego gets to play Jesus in this role. So, and then all this life around it. This to me is a perfect image of the sacred. I never get tired of looking at it. I actually have a copy of this little painting, and it's very beautiful and big in its own. I saw it in San Francisco, and it was all I could do to tear myself away. It's like, I want to move into this room and just live right here in front of this piece of work. So instead of that, I have a small version that I have made a photocopy of that I keep in my bedroom. So I wanted to share that with you just to show you, and then ask if you would put into the chat what in all of the different arts you have found most inspiring to you in your work. I'd love to hear from a number of you, and I'll be glad to read it out loud as you do, to say what has been most inspiring to you from various forms of art. And then while you're doing that, I'll mention one more, which are comics, really a big form nowadays. And I met this wonderful young man, Dylan Edwards, at a comics festival last summer. I just went to online, and he is a queer trans youth writing his own comics, and I just bought every copy of everything he had. So he's just a marvel. So all of these people everywhere are doing things. I see spoken word poetry. Yes, indeed. Any particulars? Anna Halprin, performance artist. Thank you. Calligraphic Illumination, the Book of Kells. Beautiful. There's a wonderful animated feature film about the Book of Kells. Check it out. It's on Netflix. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan is moving, so I'm trying to read this. Pakistani singer. Wonderful. Hillman, A.F. Klimt. Emily Richardson, textile artist. Ooh, there's some great textile art out there. Hillary, one name. Spatial installation and collaborative work of Ann Hamilton. Hilma, Ursula K. Le Guin, Octavia Butler. I just did a whole course on Octavia Butler. Yes, indeed. D.H. Lawrence, person I've never read. Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, Billie Holiday. Yes. Erotic art made by sex workers. Now that I haven't seen, but yes, queer BIPOC. I'd love to see more about that. Ravi Shankar, I got to see him in concert when I was in college. Starhawk, I actually met her once too. Bell Hooks. And yes, I have trouble with her name. Ntozake Shange, the great writer for Colored Girls, an extraordinary piece of work. Martin Carter. I would add also August Wilson, the writer of this extraordinary cycle of 10 plays expressing African-American voices in the 20th century. Climbing poetry, the Brady Tarot, Beverly Glenn Copeland. You are a rich source for each other of so many voices, and you just barely touched the beginnings of it. Thank you so much for putting those ideas in the chat. I want to invite you now into a quiet space within yourself. If you're willing to go there with me and you're comfortable with it, you're welcome to close your eyes if you wish, or not if you prefer. If not, just a soft gaze at nothing in particular. And I invite you into this space within you. We're going to take a little journey into our hearts. So just allow yourself to settle in. If you prefer to sit on the floor, that's fine, or in a chair. Make sure you're aware of where you're sitting, that you're in a solid place, stable, able to put your feet on the ground or your butt on the ground if you choose to sit on the floor. And then just allow yourself to relax into your breath. Take a few moments just to be aware of your breath. It is a sacred gift in its own right. It is a pattern, a rhythm, a beat, like your heartbeat, but a rhythm you can follow in and out that can lead you within any time in just moments, wherever you may be. Just this we're doing right now can often be enough to spark that awareness of that sacred voice within. But we're going to do a little more today. I want you to take some time. I'm not going to take as long as I would if we had more time to do this, but to scrunch up your muscles in your feet and your legs, and then let that all go with a sigh. And as you work your way up your body with in-breath, scrunching up some section of your body, the root of your person in your pelvis, the core of your being in your belly and lower back, and then releasing those muscles with a sigh. And then again, the chest and the upper back, tensing up those muscles, and then releasing them with a sigh. Your arms and your hands do the same. Feel every muscle you've got and allow it to really tighten up, and then relax and release with a sigh. Then your neck, shoulders, scrunch up your shoulders and squinch up your face, tightening up every muscle in your face and your neck, and let it go with a sigh. And then finally, taking your hands to the top of your head, massage all the muscles in the back of your head and the top and behind your ears and your ears too. Bring all that blood flow moving around, wake everything up, and then allow your hands just gently to run down the sides of your face like gentle warm rain. And release it all with a sigh. Feeling every portion of you, as you may, as I do, tingling, alive, and yet relaxed. This is the place from which I invite you on a short journey. Imagine you are outside in whatever place feels most beautiful and at home for you, whether it's a meadow, a forest, a beach, lakeside, riverside. Just be in that space, and then notice that you can walk gently down a little slope, just down a few steps going forward, because ahead of you is a favorite spot, a sanctuary where you can go anytime you wish to commune with this sacred space within you. This is its expression in form in your heart and mind, this sanctuary of your inner being. Once you've walked into this sanctuary, take a little time to look around. What do you see? What colors and patterns and shapes and living beings around you? What do you hear? Is there bird song, rustling of leaves, movement of water? What do you smell? Is it blossoms in the trees or the scent of water? Salt spray if you're near the ocean? Feel yourself fully in this place and give thanks for it. And then set yourself down in a spot where you feel safe, comfortable, at home. And from that place, I want you to imagine a cord of golden light that's inside your body, extending from the top of your head down through your spinal cord, down through your sitting bones, into the earth beneath you, through the soil, through the roots, and down into the bedrock. Take that cord down as far as you want it to go, to find a spot that feels right to you, where you're going to anchor that cord by wrapping it around the bedrock. That cord never has to be disconnected. It actually never has been in your whole life. That is the sacred cord that binds you to the earth of which you are a part. You don't live on the earth. You live in the earth. You are the earth. Everything that you're made of, the earth is made of. And so this sacred golden cord is there to remind you of this constant connection. And you can invoke it and bring it up into your mind and heart anytime you want to be grounded again in the source from which you come. And as you celebrate that cord's existence, that truth of your being in and as it of the earth, also invite you to raise your arms either over your head or out to the side, fingers stretched out wide. And in your sacred spot, know you're basking in the light. That too is where that sacred golden cord connects you, though it takes a much more amorphous form in the light itself, the light of day. It's all part of one interconnected set of energies that are the truth of who you are. And feel that golden energy of the sun pouring into you through your open arms and open fingers. And then gradually bring your arms back to your sides, keeping your awareness of that light, that energy that constantly infuses your being. And in this moment, become aware that you're being offered a gift from these energies, this sacredness that is part of you and in the entire universe. This gift can take a physical form, it can be an idea, it can be a feeling. However it shows up, accept this gift. It's a gift from the sacred center of who you are, the earth and the universe that holds you in a love embrace. As you become aware of this gift, allow its energy to resonate in your heart, in your mind, and perhaps in your body too, depending on what kind of a gift it is. Know that it's part of the sacredness of who you are, that this gift is given by the universe, but you are the universe. You're an individual expression of the universe. And so this gift is from you, to you, as you, and through you to the rest of the world, all of the other beings with which you are in sacred relation. So hold that gift and give thanks for it. We're going to begin to move our way back to our gradually becoming aware of where we are in place and time in this symposium. But do this gently. Give thanks to your sacred space where you have spent this time and been given this gift. Give thanks to this path you've taken as you gently Walk back up those steps you took down into your sacred space. And as you come back to the top, begin to open your eyes gently, a little at a time, holding your gift, recognizing you are blessed anew by the sacredness in you. And we'll come back together as you're moving back into your awareness of this moment, allowing your breathing to become more noticeable to you again. And I'd love you to share into the chat what gift you received from this sacred place. And know too that this sacred place is there for you anytime you wish to go there. So as you're comfortable, and if you wish to share, please share into the chat what gift you received today. You may choose to hold it to yourself and not share it too. Let me make sure you understand that's totally yours. Another set of hands. A voice for healing. A slow, deep breath. A piece of pyrite. Neighbors and community. So many meanings of that word community. A place to make art. Everyone should have such a place, absolutely. My voice is like a piece of gold that turns into a bird and flies free. That's beautiful. The call to pick up my guitar more frequently. Actually, this journey into that sanctuary could really help with that. You might try that once in a while as a beginning. Motivation to continue, lovely. And our latecomer who says, loving the idea, there's a sacred place within I can go to recharge. Absolutely. It's there for you at all times. Well, for our last few minutes here, Marla, could you possibly unmute everybody and see if there's anything people would like to share verbally about this journey into the heart and what came into their hands as a gift from that light?
All right, so I've asked to unmute all, so you can unmute yourself.
Okay, cool. If there's anyone who would like to share verbally, please do. We have about 7 minutes left. We're not going to see you all at once. There's just too many people to see, so just shout out. Go for it.
I mentioned earlier that I was on my commute home and I never quite made it back to my apartment, but I got to take a little meditative walk out in the park while you gave that meditation.
Oh, lovely, Julia. And this is being recorded, so if you like, you'll probably be able to pick up listening to later. So glad you're outside for this, too.
I believe the speaker view is recorded, not necessarily the gallery.
Ah,
So,
yes. But to be able to do the visualization, she'll have that.
Yep.
That's what I meant. Yes. Anyone else? Well, while we're waiting, you please interrupt me because I won't be able to see you. I'm going to say while waiting for someone else to who wants to share. This is my idea of the sacred, this connection between your heart, your mind, your emotions, your artistic expression. That's how you come together as a unique expression, essential expression that not only deserves but needs to be shared with the world. And this kind of inner journey sometimes can help move past a blockage or allow a person to find more of their own sense of freedom. And I offer it to you today as a gift for that purpose. You are the sacredness we're talking about here.
Creator Chris has something he'd like to say.
Jeez.
Oh, Chris, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Oh, that happens sometimes. Work on it. You've got about 5 minutes. If you figure it out, jump in. Sometimes a process like this just stops everyone speaking. Yes, go for it. I heard someone.
Feel free to chime in.
Usually when I do this kind of visualization, people are kind of fairly speechless at the end of it. They don't want to talk, and I get that. I truly do. It's offering as a gift for you for your own creative sense and what you do with it. So this sense of the sacred, I hope you find within yourself now, because that's, of course, where it truly resides. Anyone who claims that it is just outside of you in some text or statue or belief system, they're lying to you. It resides inside you, and you can go there anytime and then share it with the rest of the world. Yay!
Yay!
Creator Chris is now heard.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just typing it, but it's a really exciting time in the world. There's so many great ideas developed in political economy, and we have so much opportunity. The change is radical this decade, and all that leadership ever before is compounding. So really good time to be productive.
Yep, definitely. Thank you so much. That's how we do this thing, this process of resisting and building, empowering and inspiring. We find the core within ourselves that must be spoken aloud or visualized, and we give it forth. It's ours to do, and the world is not complete without your expression. So I'm so grateful you're here today to celebrate yourself and the sacred you are, and the sacred connections between all of us and between all of life itself. Got maybe 2 minutes here if someone else wants to jump in, but I'm coming to the end here. I love the comments you've made.